Hey guys, this is Petey here. I just wanted to run through with you guys settings optimizations for new players. So kind of just a bunch of recommended settings changes. Alright, so starting off, you can check out standard type controls or legacy type controls. You can fiddle around with these if you want. I recommend trying out both early. There's some advantages and disadvantages of both. I've recently released a video on the advantages and disadvantages and going into depth on these two. If you want to hear more details about that, you should check out that video. Next up, we can go into cutscene skipping. I highly recommend this one. If you're skipping cutscenes the old-fashioned way of pressing escape, this will save you a lot of time to just simply skip the cutscenes of everything you've already seen before. Alright, if I can jump the character here. In battle effect settings, you can show limited effects of party members or other members in whatever zones you're in. If your computer has low end specs, or simply you're in big hunt trains, for example, and there's so many flashy effects, or you're in alliance raids and everything's just getting way too crazy for you, you can use stuff like this to simplify the effects going on. Next up in item settings, I want to share with you inventory interface and retainer inventory interface. If you're on PC, I kind of recommend doing something of this fashion, or you can see more of your inventory if you have a high-res monitor like 1920 by 1080 or even bigger. You can just kind of simplify showing all the items on your screen by opening all, or even doing expanded, where you can just kind of have 2 pages, for example, if you still like big icons. Next up in UI settings in the HUD, you can disable anything you want in the HUD here if you want. I found inventory grid did not be very helpful, for example, or main scenario guide, for example. I just like to check my journal and keep my HUD cleaner. You can also change this stuff in the HUD layout when you press escape and do that kind of stuff here. You can just right click anything you don't want on your HUD, for example. And then here in targets, there's several useful things you can check here. If you only want to see debuffs that you put on your target, for example, you can check that here. Displaying the target's remaining HP percentage is useful in endgame duties. If you want to do high level content, certain things will happen when boss hits certain HP percentages. And knowing the current status of the fight, like how much DPS has been done, is helpful too, so that you know how risky you need to play, for example. So this can be a pretty helpful metric here. Another thing I recommend is number of duties displayed here. You can set that here to show how many duties you want to display on your HUD at all times, to know how many quests you want to have like active, I suppose. But I recommend checking these 2 things: hide duty list during instance duty, hide duty list during non-instance duty. Basically, whenever you're doing some sort of rather serious fight, you don't need to bother with your quests at the moment. You just need to focus on the screen, focus on the fight going on right then and there, and you can hide those duties using these options right here. Display name settings, this is more so, I recommend going through this stuff if you find that names are a little too cluttered. So, for example, I got rid of titles because when I go into a big city, all I see are names of minions, this kind of things, and it's just a little too cluttery for me. You can choose to, if any of that bothers you, you can go in here and make companions, for example, only show their names when they're targeted, or never, or only during battle, those kind of things. Next up is hotbars, and this is going to be more focused on PC players here. This will probably be the only PC focused part of the video, because I don't use cross hotbars, controller players do. Here we can enable or disable hotbars we use. You can also do this in HUD layout, which is probably how I'd recommend doing this. If you want to see more information on HUD layouts and customizing them, I have a video on that up too. I recommend using hide unassigned slots if you wish, if you don't want to see HUD slots that aren't there, like these 10 I have here. If you don't want to see these blank things here, you can set that there. Display hotbar numbers. So this is like your 1, 2, 3, 4. This is pretty useless. By default, they enable hotbar cycling and hotbar numbers showing, but this is the most useless, terrible way to be activating abilities, is to be cycling your hotbar, in my opinion. I don't know any players who use it this way. This is an old school method that was used in WoW before they had access without mods to add additional hotbars. to the UI. So I think this is kind of an archaic implementation of the hotbar system. So I recommend turning it off, but if you find it works for you, you can keep at it. Next up is hotbar sharing. Well, this tells you what hotbars are going to be shared between classes. So I reserve the first 4 hotbars to be exclusive to the class I set to. So as you can see when I displayed hotbar numbers, I have 1, 2, 3, and then this is my 4th hotbar that can't be seen, but it's this one right here, that 4. You can see it now. These 4 hotbars are exclusive to a class, so that when I change classes, these 4 hotbars change, but my other hotbars over here have not changed. So that's set right there. In the sharing tab, you can set if you want to make 5 exclusive hotbars or 3, and so on. For shared hotbars, I want to share with you guys using them to kind of create custom hotkeys for yourself. So created a shared hotbar over here that I've put at low transparency, basically just to see the cooldown of these moves. I don't really click this at all, but I've basically used this bar to set up hotkeys for myself. So this over here is F1, F2, F3. If you want to see more how I use this F bar, and I've set up some of the macros, like I've set up a change job macro here to switch to whatever job I want. I have another video on that, but you can basically assign like, you know, teleport, return to any sort of hotkey you want over here, and these are very frequently used buttons. So I recommend setting up some kind of thing here where you can press like F2 to get on your mount, or just whatever hotkey you want to use to do that. And sprint for every character for me is the same hotkey. Limit break is the same hotkey. This kind of thing, I think there should be a shared hotbar, visible or non-visible. That's your choice, between all classes that basically use the same unison of hotkeys. And I use like F1 to switch to dancer and start dashing through cities, basically. You can do that kind of stuff. Here in keybinds, if you go to hotbar, you can scroll down to whatever your specified shared hotbar is. This is my hotbar 10, for example. I scrolled down here to 10 and set all these hotkeys for these commands that I use. Next up, I have enable profanity filter. We should definitely get rid of that because F-Fesh is. Scrolling down, we have log filters. So you can pick everything that is shown in each log window, I suppose. The chat log has basically all this stuff that you'd expect, all the communication channels. The battle log has nothing in the chat channel, but everything related to combat in here. And then the event has everything, NPC dialogue, all that good stuff, so you can follow the story. And then I like to add, the battle log is basically cluttered with a lot of things, and it's very difficult to read. I found it useful to find out how I died, so I could learn more about a fight when something goes wrong. And I like to make a sort of filtered version of the battle log that shows me how I died. And so I can see myself like losing buffs, gaining buffs, or gaining debuffs, and then how much damage I'm taking from targets. So if you want to see stuff like this to better analyze how you died during fights on the fly, and you don't want to use FF logs or some sort of parser, for example, you can use these settings right here. Damage you are dealt, actions used on you, beneficial effects granted to you, and detrimental effects inflicted on you. And these bottom 2 ones as well. These 6 are sufficient to get a very condensed idea of what happened to you, what debuffs hit you, vulnerability ups perhaps, and how much damage you took. So this has been very helpful. Lastly, if you have any sort of vision impairment, you can go to system configuration and accessibility settings. There is color filtering for any 3 common sorts of colorblind. So if you have any sort of issue in that area, you can use this page to simplify that stuff and make it more accessible to you. Over here in the sound settings, I highly recommend checking play sounds when Windows is not active, and checking system sounds, and possibly sound effects. So system sounds, this will tell you when your queue pops. So if you are the type to queue up in Duty Finder, and then Alt-Tab and go do something else like watch a video, you will hear the queue pop as long as you have play system sounds while waiting for Duty Finder checked as well. And that way you can Alt-Tab, watch a video, do whatever you want, and as long as you're listening closely, you can hear that sound and tab back in, join the duty, and you won't miss queues. So I highly recommend that. You also won't miss ready checks if you're in a party. So this is also being considered to other party members. If you are actually there, but you are all tabs and you're not hearing the ready check and everyone's waiting for you, not knowing that you're actually there. So this should be enabled by default, I think, on everyone's system. I also recommend unchecking play music when mounted in most scenarios because we can only stand the chocobo mount music for so long before we go crazy. And in addition to that, the background music of most zones is quite nice. In mouse settings, you'll notice that I have a giant cursor, and that's because by default, hardware cursor FFX IV custom is enabled by default, but I have opted for the software cursor and set the mouse cursor size to maximum because really I wanted a big cursor because I frequently lost my cursor on the screen. There are some abilities that I preferred to click, and I was having a hard time clicking them because I would lose track of my cursor because when you right click or left click, your cursor goes away. And I think a lot of habit players get in is they're constantly holding right click to have better control over their character. They can turn and move all the time, and they're doing all this moving and they're fighting and whatever, using hotkeys, casting buffs, spells, whatever. And then they're like, I don't remember where my cursor is. I've been holding right click so I can turn and stuff constantly. And then they're like, oh, I need to click something on my hotbar. So let me stop right clicking, move down here to click. But they lost track of their cursor. When there's a bunch of crap on screen, I used to lose track of my cursor a lot because I'd hold right click for very long durations. And then when I went to go click stuff on my hotbar, I wasn't able to find my cursor. Ever since I switched to a large cursor, that problem has been gone for me. So you can consider doing something like that if it helps you. That's all I got for you guys. If this video helped you, please leave a like. Other than that, if you want to see more content from me, a subscribe will help. Thank you everyone out there who's already shown their support. I appreciate it. If you guys have any questions about the settings I've talked over, or any questions or optimizations or recommendations in settings that you have for yourself, go ahead and leave them in the comments. They're much appreciated. We're here to help each other. We can all be mutually helpful. Thanks for your time, guys. Take it easy.